Hey there everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today's video is really exciting. I am actually going to be doing some ACT English passage questions from the ACT website directly. So we're going to be talking about what type of question we're working with, how to deal with that question, how to look at the surrounding context, and kind of make sense out of everything that's going on. So I'm actually going to be doing the questions and answering them live for you guys. And just as a reminder for everybody, all of our books and crash courses, the links for those are located down below in the description. So make sure to check out our options. Everything that we sell is relatively low cost, and it can definitely help you to achieve success on your upcoming exams. So without further ado, guys, let's jump into today's video. All right, so as we discussed, we're working live off of the ACT.org website. After every, 5 questions, we submit our answers. My hope is that we'll be correct. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, we're going to be correct on all of these questions. So let's begin with question number 1. This is a punctuation question. It's also a parallelism question. Let's see why. So first, I can see in the choices what they're changing is the punctuation. A has a semicolon, B puts double commas, C puts 1 comma, and D has no punctuation. So when I keep reading in this paragraph, we can see that it says hip waders hanging in the closet, semicolon. Tied table charts covering the refrigerator door, semicolon. So we can see that after they list each individual term, they're putting a semicolon in there in order to end that term. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping that consistent in what I put for the underlined portion. So the only choice that's inserting a semicolon after we finish a term has got to be choice A. So that's the only one that's keeping the structure parallel or consistent throughout. Looking at question number 2. Number 2 is also a parallelism question. It's a little bit of verb tense as well. So when it comes to keeping the tense consistent, we want to make sure that we're keeping the verb tense exactly the same when we're talking about different terms in exactly the same list, because we got to keep the tense consistent throughout there. So I can see that it says waiting, hanging, covering. So in order to keep that consistent, I have to pick the ing, which is going to be option G. If it said table charts were covering, hip waders were hanging, then I would consider putting a was in front of the ing verb. But because we don't see any of that, I'm just going to go with the ing sitting. All right, and then looking at question number 3. So this is basically a question that's testing us on concision. So having studied, my mom is a marine biologist. As my mother's interest is in science, she is a marine biologist. My mother's occupation is that of a marine biologist. So the point is, obviously if she's a marine biologist, she likes science. We know that it's going to be her occupation if you say she is a marine biologist, and obviously she had to have studied to get there. So these are all things that are already implied by simply stating that she's a marine biologist. So there's no reason to add all of this extraneous information. Keep it concise. We don't need to say anything that's already implied. So choice D would be the best option afforded right there. Alrighty, and then question number 4. Our household might have been described as uncooperative. So they want us to pick a choice that's going to introduce the rest of the paragraph. So obviously what we need to do is read the rest of the paragraph right here. Our meals weren't always served in the expected order of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything was, we don't know if that's right, the tides. When the tide was low, mom could be found down on the mud flats. When the tide was high, she would be standing on the inlet bridge. So basically they're talking about how everything in their household depends on the tides, and the mom's behavior, it all depends on the tides because she works as a marine biologist. So choice E here, the no change, our household might have been described as uncooperative. Nobody isn't getting along with anybody, so that doesn't seem plausible. There seemed to be no explanation for why she ran the house the way she did. Well, there's a great explanation. In fact, she's a marine biologist, so obviously the tides are relevant. G, our household didn't run according to a typical schedule. Sounds reasonable because the mom is always out doing something, so they didn't always, operate in a typical fashion. So G looks good. H, mom ran our household in a spectacular manner. There's nothing spectacular about what she's doing here. It just is her job. So it's got to be choice G then. Alrighty, and number 5 is going to be a wording question. So what we want to remember is that we need to be formal, but at the same time, we don't want to be over the top. We're trying to say that the tides kind of dictated, or the tides were the reason why their schedule was the way that it was. So subservient to the disposal of is way too formal, way too over the top. So that's going to be a no-go. Was defenseless in the face of, okay, nothing was defenseless without defense. Like obviously the mom is choosing to make their schedule contingent on the tides. Trusted in also doesn't make sense. It's not about trusting. It's depended on, because everything basically goes in accordance with the tides. The tides determine how everything operates in that household. All right, so let's put in our answers. Look at us, guys. We got everything right. Woo! Was really hoping so, honestly. How embarrassing would that be, right? I'm totally teasing. Okay, so let's look at the next set of questions. So question 6, which choice signals a shift from the preceding paragraph? Pre means before, think prequel. The preceding paragraph to this paragraph. So I want to point out that a shift is really different from an introduction. If it were just an introduction, we would only care about the contents of the new paragraph. But because they're asking for a shift, aka like a transition type of question, we have to account for what we talked about in this previous paragraph. And as a reminder, in this previous paragraph, we were talking about how basically in the house, the tides kind of dictated everything when the meals were served, what was in the house, because the mom was a marine biologist. All right, so let's look at the next paragraph. I learned early that the moon affected the tides. Mom was always waiting for a full or new moon. The moon aligned with Earth and the sun when this was true. Here's the gravity. So I didn't have to learn this stuff in school. In our house, we learned this knowledge. Okay, so basically now it's talking about how the Earth and, well, rather the tides here are affected by the moon, and how that also affects what's going on in their household and the mom's work schedule for that matter, which ends up affecting the household. So looking at E, I have great respect for my mother. It's not talking about her relationship or his relationship with his mom or her mom, so it can't be that. F, our lives were likewise affected by the phases of the moon. Well, in the previous paragraph, they were talking about how their lives were affected by the tides, and here they're also talking about the significance of the moon in the mom's work schedule. I also really like the word likewise because that does link to the preceding paragraph, because it's drawing a comparison between what they just talked about. So we really like to see transition words in these questions when they ask us to signal a shift or transition from one paragraph to the next. Choice G, a relationship exists between the moon and the tides. That would be a good introduction sentence, but again, it's asking us to shift. So choice G doesn't account for the previous paragraph. And H, the moon is a mysterious orb. I mean, I think it's pretty non-mysterious given how they're characterizing it. It seems pretty predictable and cyclical, so that's a no. All right, then checking out number 7. So number 7, our goal here, what I want to point out is we can see that there's right after the word new, comma, so. So we're going to do a little punctuation, and we're going to pull over to the side here. So whenever we see, anytime we see basically a comma with the word or acronym fanboys, we're going to write down what fanboy stands for in a second. Fanboy stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So obviously when we see the comma paired with so, that's an example of comma fanboys. And we use comma fanboys to link two full sentences. You also might have heard this referred to as two independent clauses. So because we see a comma with a so, I know that my goal here is to make this whole part from the to new a full sentence. So if we pick choice A, the moon being aligned with Earth, that's not going to be a full sentence because being is not a verb that has been conjugated. We would need to say the moon is or the moon was aligned. We would need to conjugate being for that to be a sentence. So it can't be A then. Choice B, since the moon is aligned. Well, this is not going to be a full sentence because it starts with a word that leaves it open-ended. Try starting something with since. Since I'm tired. See, it's a cliffhanger. It leaves you like ... So this one's also not going to make that a full sentence. Choice C, that's exactly what we said we wanted. The moon is aligned with Earth and the sun when full or new. So that's going to work as a full sentence. Choice D doesn't even have a verb at all. The moon aligned. You can't not have a verb for something to be a full sentence. So it's got to then be choice C. So let me clear all of that. And we're going to then pick choice C. Whoopsies. Oh my goodness, I keep clicking D. All right, 8. So let's check this out. So this is a pronoun question. So first and foremost, we're talking about the moon here. So the moon we know refers to a singular thing. All right, so the moon we know is a singular thing. And so therefore as a pronoun, so it's singular and it's an object. So when we deal with it as a pronoun, we know that its pronoun is going to be it. So first and foremost, choice H, I-T-S apostrophe, this is not even a real word in English, so knock that out whenever you see that. Choice G breaks down into it is. We cannot say so it is gravity combines, that doesn't make sense. Choice F is saying ones, like the moon is not just something you have a bunch of, it's not like pencils and then you can refer to like, oh, there's one over there, like there's literally just a singular moon, so you can't have like, one of it here, one of it there, so F doesn't make sense. Choice E is the possessive form of it. So ITS, gravity, refers to the moon's gravity. ITS is used for ownership or possession, so that makes sense here because the gravity belongs to the moon. So we want to then go ahead and pick choice E, the no change for question number 8. Looking at question 9, if the writer were to delete the phrase 16 hours for a complete cycle of tides from the preceding sentence, what would the essay lose in terms of a detail? Okay, so let's see what we have right now. I knew that it took about 8 hours for the tides to change from high to low and 16 hours for a complete cycle of tides. So let's start with A. A says that we would lose a detail that shows how the narrator's interests are different from the mom's. This is not anything about the narrator's interest. This is merely a scientific fact, so that's a no. B contradicts a point made earlier in the paragraph. There's nothing talking about the time earlier in the paragraph, so that's going to be a no. Helps establish the setting for the essay. No, that would not establish a setting. This is not talking about like the place or like laying out the scene. Choice D displays the narrator's knowledge of the tides. Yes, this is basically used to show that the narrator has knowledge as to how the tides work in terms of their timing. So choice D would be correct then. Alrighty, then let's look at number 10. So for number 10, we have a comma after the word often. So the reason why we have a comma after often is just because often is like an opening or like an introductory phrase. So that comma belongs there only for that reason. Let's then check out choices F and G. As we talked about for an earlier question, we said that when we put a comma in front of fanboys, that means that we need to have a full sentence on both sides. Well, obviously, my brother is not a full sentence, so you can't put a comma end here, comma fanboys. Same thing goes with choice G. So now we're left with either E or H. So the reason why we don't want to put a comma, meaning we don't want to pick choice E, we want to pick H, is because the purpose of a single comma is to link one non-sentence with one full sentence. Again, you might have heard of this called a dependent and an independent clause. So my brother and I, that's not going to work. That's not a sentence. And neither is joined our mother. So whenever we get two non-full sentences, we don't want to put any punctuation with them because they need to stick together to make one big full sentence. So it cannot be choice E then. It's got to be choice H. So let me go ahead and erase that so we can go ahead and pick that. All right. Woo, look at us guys. All right, again, killing it out here. I'm just really praising myself, I guess, because you guys aren't with me, even though you're with me in spirit. Alrighty, so the last 5, let's check these out. So number 11, so here it is. At the very low tides of the full moon, when almost all the water was sucked away. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about equivalent answer choices. So whenever we have a period and a semicolon, those two choices are grammatically the same thing. A period and a semicolon, and comma fanboys for that matter, those are all used to link two full sentences to independent clauses. So automatically looking here, B, C, and D are all basically functioning in the same way, so I know it has to be choice A, the no change. But the reason why it is choice A, let me pull out the pen, is because whenever we have double commas in a sentence, that's basically telling the reader that we can cross out the information inside and read around it. And watch how that would make sense. At the very low tides of the full moon, we found the hideaways where crabs, snails, starfish, and sea urchins hid. That makes perfect sense. So we should, in fact, because we start this phrase with a comma, end it with a comma as well. Alrighty, looking at number 12. So number 12 is going to be a concision question, basically picking short and sweet, kind of like the one before where they talked about the mom's occupation. So picking choice E would just be unnecessary. To say hideaways where they hid in order to not be seen, like that's the whole point of a hideaway. So that would be repetitive to say. Concealed and hid means the same thing in choice F. Places where they were stashed away, that's relatively informal. So the only choice then that's going to be both formal and concise has got to be choice H. Alrighty, and then we're looking at number 13. So we need to rearrange these sentences, or maybe not rearrange them, keep them the same to make this paragraph the most logical. So let's see what's going on. It says, often my brother and I joined our mother on her adventures into tidal lands. Okay, so that definitely should be the first sentence here because that's functioning as basically like the intro into what it is that they're doing. Because you can see right here it says, we found the hideaways. Sometimes we would dig. So we need the introductory sentence to explain what it is that the kids are doing at the beach. So one definitely has to come first, and the only option that would include that would have to be choice A. Number 14. Let's scroll down. Given that all the choices are true, which one provides information that's relevant and makes the rest of the paragraph understandable? All right, so let's read before. For plankton toads, we would stand on the bridge while mom lowered a cone-shaped net. All right, we're going to ignore that for a second because we don't know if that's right. Then we would patiently wait. After a while, she'd pull up the net and we would go home. Later, we would see her at the kitchen table, peering at a drop of water through the lens of her microscope, watching the thousands of tiny swimming organisms. So basically, we got to put something here that has to do with the fact that she's trying to catch these plankton. So let's start with E. A cone-shaped net that is often used by marine biologists. Sounds reasonable. I wouldn't eliminate that. F had a specimen bottle attached to its smaller end. All right, again, that sounds decently reasonable. Like the specimen bottle could be where she's catching them. G was woven from cotton and nylon. That has nothing to do with the process right here. And H was shaped like a geometric figure, irrelevant. I want to point something out though. If you look later in the paragraph, it says from the bottle. So calling it the bottle wouldn't make sense unless at a previous point in the paragraph we've mentioned the kind of bottle that we're talking about. So it then has to be choice F as the best answer to make the rest of the paragraph understandable, because otherwise where did the bottle come from? Alrighty, and finishing up with question 15, the best placement for the underlined portion would be where? Okay, so peering at a drop of water. So let's see. So peering at a drop of water through the lens from the bottle. Okay, so the drop of water we know is coming from the bottle. So let's see the options. So B is lens, peering through the lens at a drop of water of her microscope. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's not a water droplet from her microscope. C, so B is out. C, after the word microscope, peering through the lens of her microscope at a drop of water from the bottle. That makes sense. D, let's see, peering through the lens of her microscope from the bottle at a drop of water. Well, she's not peering from the bottle at a drop. She has to obviously take it out of the bottle. So she's looking through the microscope at a drop of water. This phrase should modify what it is that she's looking at in the microscope, so that should be choice C. Alrighty, guys, and we are all good. These are all correct. So that is a wrap for today. Let me know, guys, in the comments below if you'd like for me to walk through more ACT English passages. We can also do this for math, reading, and science from the ACT website. Thank you so much for watching. Hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot about grammar in general and specifically how that grammar is applicable to the ACT English section. Again, if you enjoyed, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and check out all of our books and crash courses in the description below. Thanks again, guys. Take care.